My entitled husband disappeared after a boys' trip. Years later, he showed up at my doorstep with a baby, so I destroyed his life. He would often make offhanded comments about me, insulting my weight and lack of fitness. But when I confronted him, he would deny everything and claim that everything was normal. His change bothered me at the start because I thought he was forcing himself to accept reality, but as time went on, I forgot about it and moved on. Then came the big moment. He planned a trip. We lived in Brighton, which is in Europe, and he wanted to go to America for a trip with his friends. This wasn't the first boys' trip he had gone on, so I was very supportive of him. I even helped him pack and bought him new clothes to wear on the trip. Little did I know, he had a crazy plan cooking inside his head. After dropping him at the airport, I went home and stayed up so I could call him and make sure he was safe when he landed. After 9 hours of drinking coffee to stay awake, I checked that his flight had landed and called him to make sure. The ringtone rang, but he didn't pick up. I tried a few more times and even texted him about it, but still, there was no reply. Thinking he was tired and had gone to sleep at the hotel, I also tucked myself into the bed. But since I was still extremely worried about his well-being, I kept waking up and checking my phone for updates. In the morning, I noticed that he still hadn't called back or replied to my texts. After trying for a few more minutes, I called his sister to ask if he had talked to my husband. He hadn't, so I decided to call my husband's friends who were supposed to be on the trip with him. That might sound very invasive, but I genuinely thought it was an emergency. For the longest time, I have had a fear of my plane crashing into the water, and I didn't want my husband to go through that horrible fate. But when I called his friends, guess where they were at? They were 2 blocks away, having morning tea at a cafe. I thought it was a silly prank and I was being messed with. But no, my husband had truly disappeared and abandoned me. I was distraught, went in deep depression and completely went off the rail. I got really drunk and showed up at his parents' house, claiming that they were hiding them. My mother-in-law was really kind and understanding of my situation. However, he let me in his home and comforted me for days. I can't remember how many times I cried on his shoulder. Eventually, I accepted reality and began working on moving on. It took me a long time. Even with the support of my family and friends, I still missed my husband a lot. I kept thinking that he hadn't abandoned me, and maybe he had suffered a terrible fate and was waiting for me to rescue him. I had to go to therapy for 2 long years before I stopped having nightmares about him being lost in a forest, but I didn't give up and did in fact move on. I was going on yoga classes with my friends again, going to pubs with them and getting absolutely smashed, joining the gym and finally working on my fitness level. I even got a promotion at my company. I thought that my life, which had stopped in time, was finally moving again, and I was happy. But, of course, my husband had to ruin that as well. A little less than 4 years after he disappeared, I saw my husband standing at my door with a baby in his arms. I thought that my life, which had stopped in time, was finally moving again, and I was happy. But of course, my husband had to ruin that as well. A little less than 4 years after he disappeared, I saw my husband standing at my door with a baby in his arms. I thought that I was dreaming again and asked, "Is that really you?" He excitedly said yes and asked if he could come in. But I refused and told him to keep standing. I didn't know what was going on, but wasn't going to be deceived again. "Why did you come back?" I asked him, and his reply enraged me more than anything. "I know that you are angry, but let me explain. I did this for us and our future. I was really unhappy in our marriage and needed a way out. I'm sorry for what I did to you, but it had to be done. I wanted a child, and you couldn't give that to me, and I thought that running away from you and having a child with someone else would be the only solution. But once I had him, I realized that I wanted to come back to you. You were still the one whom I loved in my heart. So here I am. I want to raise this child, our child together with you, and spend the rest of our married life happily." I took a moment to process his words and then just started laughing. This man was crazy if he thought that he was justified in what he did. I calmly told him, "Listen, you and I are done. You betrayed me and left me. Our relationship ended that day, and I have moved on. I don't know that child and probably never will, so just leave and go back to where you came from." That was a pretty good way to end things off, in my opinion. But he didn't like it and began yelling at me as if his earlier words were nothing but a rehearsed script. "What? Are you crazy? I'm saying that I'm ready to spend my life with you, so why are you turning me away? You do realize that I could have divorced you and taken this house along with half your money, or I could have taken some expensive things with me when I disappeared. But I didn't do any of it. And still, you think I don't deserve a second chance? Think again, or otherwise you will deeply regret it." I laughed at him once more and explained that if he wanted to be a criminal, he was welcome to do so. I was actually glad that my heart wasn't moved by his words. I was still mad at him but could control my anger perfectly, meaning that I had truly moved on. I called him crazy and shut the door in his face, deciding to never see him again. But after one day, I had a change of mind. I came to the realization that he wasn't being punished for his actions, and I needed to change that. I didn't deserve what he did to me, and I wanted some payback. I found him whereabouts and found out that he had gone to his parents' house. I had actually built a really nice relationship with them during these years, but I was extremely disappointed that they would forgive him and take him back in. I get it. They are him parents and can't just turn him away. But I still sent a text to his mother saying how disheartened I was by her actions. Then, I decided to find out what happened. I couldn't find out anything about the baby's mother, except that she was nowhere near involved anymore. And he was planning on getting a job to pay for his expenses. I found out what companies he had applied for, and one of them was my own. First, I rejected his application for my company. Then, I sent them all a very long email about how he was manipulative, deceitful and unloyal, and didn't deserve to be hired. I had actually worked really hard and rose to an executive position in my company, so my word held a lot of weight. Just as I had expected, he was rejected from every single job that he applied for. Now, he has no income and probably doesn't even have enough money to leave the city. His parents aren't that well off. They can't afford to keep him in their house for much longer, especially with the baby in the picture. In fact, I've already got several texts and voicemails from them. Some are apologizing about them taking their son back in, but others are asking me for some money, sympathy, and support. Obviously, I'm ignoring everything. I also texted my husband's friends, telling them to not support him in any way. They are all on my side because they were also blindsided by his actions of 4 years ago. So he will have no choice but to raise a child all on his own while struggling to find food on the street. My satisfaction levels are off the roof, and I'm going to have the best sleep of my life. You can now check if there is a part 3 by clicking share and more.